Okay, good afternoon, everybody. I'll call this meeting to order. I would just like to, the only announcement I have is Go Dragons Go. We're here to support you. We're excited for you, and let's win this game tonight so that we can carry on. I doubt many of us counselors will make it based on this lengthy agenda, but we'll be thinking of you. So I would just like to make a proclamation, or first actually, I would like to, swear in our new deputy mayor for the months of March and April. So, Fred?
Which hand do I mean? I, Fred McEwiggy, do swear that I will diligently, faithfully, and to the best of my ability execute according to the law, the officer of counselor for the Drumheller, the town of Drumheller, so help me God. Is that deputy mayor? Sworn before me, that's you. Yeah. That it? Didn't say deputy mayor, it said counselor.
Way to go, Fred. I'll keep you busy. You can sign your life away. Okay, I have a couple proclamations to read. Sorry, just a sec. Oh, Mike's so efficient, he puts them right on the front page. Every year, thousands of Canadians, so this is Fraud Prevention Month, sorry. Every year, thousands of Canadians fall victim to fraud. Most people don't think it could happen to them, but fraudsters are using increasingly sophisticated methods to target people of all ages and from all walks of life. The impact on individuals, families, and businesses is devastating. Retirement savings, homes, businesses, in some cases, lives have been lost. The good news is the majority of frauds can be prevented by identifying the methods used by fraudsters. The more you know about fraud, the less likely you are to fall for it. Through awareness, you can avoid becoming a victim. Therefore, I, Mayor Heather Kohlberg, proclaim the month of March as Fraud Prevention Month. I'd also like to make a proclamation for International Women's Day. Sunday, March 8, 2020 is International Women's Day. The 2020 campaign theme is Equal for Equal. An equal world is an enabled world. Individually, we are all responsible for our thoughts and actions all day, every day. We can actively choose to challenge stereotypes, fight bias, broaden perceptions, improve situations, and celebrate women's achievements. Collectively, each one of us can help create a gender equal world. Let's all be equal for equal. Therefore, can I get a motion to adopt the agenda? Tony? Secretary, Chris, or Lisa, comments, additions, deletions? All in favor? Carried. Can I get a motion to adopt the minutes of February 18th regular council meeting? Tom, seconder, Christine, all in favor? Carried. And the minutes before you of the MPC meetings, could I get a motion for the MPC meeting of January 16th? Tom, seconder, Tony, comments? All in favor? Carried. And could we move on to 6.1.1, Daryl, please?
Thank you, Your Worship. So we want to be able to, I think everyone has in front of them the strategic priorities chart that we had done last year through some strategic goal setting. So those, you do not have that?
Libby or Mike, could I just add you, just take this one and get a couple copies and we'll just carry on? I'll just work off of Fred's for now.
Okay.
All right, so
So
we'll start.
4, Libby, 4 copies, please. Well, that didn't start out well, did it? But everyone had. So this, the priorities chart looks a little different than we've done in past years. I think Gord McIntosh, who's done them for us, looked at it and cleaned it up quite a bit for us going forward. And just while we're waiting for the sheets, just one of the things that we had talked about when we went through this was not to put very large goals of, for instance, flood mitigation, because flood mitigation isn't just a 2020 strategic priority, it's a 2021, 22, 23. So to become more specific into actually things that we're doing. So that's the way that we had put the list together. Some of the things that we've put on here are now complete. Some of them are still in action. And I think, again, learning from what we've done before will only help make this better in future years. So if we want to, I'm just trying to stall for time here while we get photocopies. So. Okay, we're good. Okay, so I think what we want to do is if we go to operational priorities first of all, because under Chief Administrative Officer, so Civic Solar lease, November. So with respect to the actual lease, the lease has been signed. It was in January, not November. However, and we know that's just one specific component of it. So I think the next piece on, so that would be a completed task on there, but the next piece would be to move Civic Solar, move into actually operational piece, so that expropriation's completed and that there is action on with the solar farm. So what I'm suggesting is that the word Civic Solar stays, lease turns into land acquisition, and that we look at May as the date for that.
Just a question. What is the projected date approximately of, say, a ribbon cutting? Like when it would be totally all complete, functional, going, cut the ribbon? What are we looking at?
Well, since that's a good question, Tom, I think the part of that is out of our control, so it all depends on what Alberta Utilities Commission does for approval. The proponent was originally looking at approvals and construction to happen this year, with the idea that they would be up and running by spring of 21. It might be a bit sooner, might not be. It all depends. I think with respect to where we are in the cycle of being able to get land and them moving through with AUC, that's all on schedule, but part of it depends on if there's anything that comes out of the AUC hearing. So.
Okay, so I'll just put the 1st of May 4th meeting, or?
Sure.
Okay.
Okay. Public communications gap analysis, November. So that was started in November, completed in the end of January, by the time holidays and everything finished around. And the next step is action out of that. So the action would be, I'm looking at probably, sorry, I'm just trying to look at the calendar, probably April 13th would be a action item for that. So. ICF memorandum, so those are, and we'll see them all come to us in March of this year as they're required to. So I think they were all started in earnest in December. However, they're going to be completed by March 31st. So. Yeah, sure. Well, yeah. I think the update will actually happen March 30th because that's the council meeting that they all get approved at. So, and then the next two on the list. So again, the idea was that those other things are once you're are some of the things that once stuff falls off of it. So derelict buildings is just on our list to tackle this spring. I know between Sean and I and Greg, we've done some work on it already. So, and then service levels, KPIs is something that we're it's just we're working on it all the time. We saw Dave's report last quarterly report, and some others are starting to show KPIs on them. So we'll just be building that throughout the year. Any questions on that? Have we done that right or wrong? I went first because I wasn't sure. So okay, good. All right, so I'm going to turn it over to everybody to do their own. So next on the list is corporate.
Thank you. So, everybody knows this is extremely busy time of year for corporate services. So we are going to endeavor to have the bylaw inventory, the priority list done by mid-April. Same with the new draft or revised draft of the purchasing policy being brought forward for council consideration sometime in early April. The IT upgrades, that would be the Office 365 installation. It's anticipated, it's near the end of the the project now, so by March 31st, I would expect everything to be fully deployed and operational at the latest, and all the bugs worked out. With regards to human resources, I don't have a definitive answer for 1 and 2. I know that recently Nicole had spoke to council regarding the service innovation and the direction that council is looking for. So I would anticipate by the end of April, she'll have something more to offer in the direction of council for at least some of her research. The wellness policy is done. As you're aware, it was adopted recently. And then by mid-April, we should have a priority listing of the job descriptions that need to be reviewed. And similarly, we will come up with a priority listing of the immediate HR policy sections that need to be reviewed that she'll be working on.
Okay, so I've got
Mid-April.
customer service April 27th, service innovation April 27th, wellness done, job description April 13th, HR policy April 13th.
That sounds great.
Okay,
Thank you.
All right, Darren.
So for Recreation, Heritage, Arts and Culture, the Community Recreation Service Level Review has not been started as of yet. We're hoping to start that in May after we've done a little bit of the assessment portion of it to make sure that we're meeting community needs, and then the staffing level will go along with that as well. The facility condition assessment, terms of reference, currently have been working with Dave on that for particularly the Aquaplex and the next phase of that and some of the repairs that needs to happen there. And then with the Heritage, Arts and Culture strategy, the Heritage, Arts and Culture Steering Committee met and discussed these at the February meeting. But unfortunately not a lot of the members were there, so after a brief discussion they took some of the work home, and we're going to review some of the information that we currently have, and then it'll be brought back at their March meeting. So we'll be able to bring that strategy forward to have them probably present to council.
Okay, so do you want to give me some dates here so we can update? Somebody give Darren a
I
calendar.
don't have a calendar. So with the service level review, like I say, we'll be starting that in May. So when it comes back to council, will probably be June before we can bring that one back.
Okay, which date would you like? June.
Is it a CAL or is it regular council?
Doesn't matter, they're just gonna come forward as they,
Probably the 15th.
okay.
Facility, as far as the terms of reference on the facility assessment for particularly the Aquaplex, Dave, how do we feel that we are on phase 3 with that? Probably April?
Yeah, April for that one.
April's probably April 20th.
Yes, that's correct.
And then as far as Heritage, Arts and Culture strategy coming back, they don't meet until it'll be the 4th Tuesday, so that's March 24th. So that could probably come back April 6th.
Okay, thanks so much. Greg?
Thank you, Your Worship. Under Protective Services, Livery Bylaw Transport Networking Company, the commission and I have met on this, and given the landscape, I guess, with the Uber and Lyft, Drumheller wouldn't command any kind of alteration, so or in the bylaw right now that they would see fit to come in and operate, so I can report back to council on that at any time. At this time, we're not necessitate altering the bylaw because, sure, yeah, I can do that, yeah.
Okay, March 16th.
We've started preparations already for the Hoodoo parking, so it says pilot report, but it's the second year of it, so July, I mean, we're gonna hopefully start earlier, unless you'd like it earlier, the report. And like an interim report on how this year's looking, is this what council would like?
Yeah, I don't think this should be on here. Yeah, I think you're just going to report at the end of summer. Yeah, should be done. So
the end of
you've
summer?
done your thing there. Thanks, Greg.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it'll just come through in his regular report then from there on.
I mean, I can do a short interim report if council would like as to why.
No, just bring it back with your quarterlies. Keep us in loop. Pardon me? Okay.
That's our theme song this year, yeah. A traffic bylaw, I am working on a draft. It is not complete.
Oh, that's okay. You don't have to update us on that one because you're working on that one. But the fire code
And the fire
compliance?
fire code compliance. That mean December of this year? Because there have been some changes in the fire code that will necessitate some changes internally and how I and the fire department work on these. So I could report in September or earlier, whatever. Well, I think by September, we would have more of an outlay as to how it's going to look for this year and
Okay,
then next year.
September 7th.
Okay.
Thank you, Greg. Dave?
So for the cemetery plan, the request for clarification was brought to council back in November. There was a lively discussion about it. From that RFC, I've developed terms of reference for the project for a guidance committee and an RFD for the guidance committee. I believe the intention is to bring those to the council of the whole next week. So
No, it won't be because we've got a strategic planning session that day. So 23rd?
that's fine by me.
Okay.
The Rotary Park fountain budget item was, we looked at this, and upon discussion with Darwin, the flood mitigation office, and with the DARP, the intention is to operate the fountain as it was operated at the end of last year, because carrying out any major work in that area at the same time as doing the DARP and the flood operation would result in potentially conflicting work being done. So the intention this year is to operate it as per last year of what was in the at the end of last year, which was what Darwin presented in the report in the fall. I think that was September or October. So that's the intention for right now. The town presence.
Can I just stop you there?
Okay.
On that one, could we maybe have Darwin present on that, just so we as a community also have
have an
some
update on
input?
it?
So I'll get a date from him on the
Okay.
update? Okay,
That
thanks.
sounds fine. The town presence and cleanliness, there was a request for clarification brought to council at the same time the cemetery plan one was, which was sometime in November. From the input on that, I've started the basis of the work. Due to generating the budget items, I've fallen behind on that item. So I should be ready to bring that forward for some form of review probably at the end of this month. First week of April would be what I will target.
April 6th?
Yeah.
Okay.
And then just for everyone's notice, the East Cooley lift station construction is underway. Scheduled completion is the end of March.
Thanks, Dave. Communications, do you have, well, actually, those things just move up as we get something off, so. Communication, are we
Yeah,
waiting
so
there?
I
Okay.
can do that, yeah. So So branding, logo, December. So of course, the work was ongoing. It came to council just recently. Was sort of the about the 90% status, and I believe that their final meeting is Wednesday, and we'll be presenting, I think, the final version to everything. Christine, I'm looking at you. Yeah. No, that's fine. That's fine. So are we looking at April 6th, March 30th? So let's just say an update, April 6th update at least, okay? Website upgrade, the EOI, so that had been put on the back burner because of the 1 and 3, the website, but it will be going out this month. So I would say just if we get an update on it at the March 30th meeting, that should be good. And then a town app. So this was specific to guidelines, December, but so the guidelines that were out, the app is actually in operation, and been a few modifications already to it, but it's in development. So it's done. Yeah. I don't know if it'll ever be done, but it can come off the list. So okay.
All right, community development.
Ooh, darn it. So youth program proposal in November. So that came to council in, I think, December. It was or beginning of January. So that can come off the list. Events coordination proposal also in November. That came through, and ultimately that was both of those were supported through the budget process. Poverty reduction, short-term initiatives. Initially was discussed for December. It actually came in the February. There was a presentation on it, and there was there were some outcomes as a result of that. That council funded through the budgeting process as well. So the other parts that are moving up, and those are done, is that that group is looking to develop a client database, kind of a one-stop shop, because right now if folks are using services of, for instance, Salvation Army, Town of Drumheller, some others, they each have, every single time they have to pull out all of their information and apply again, and they're trying to develop something that's kind of a one-stop shop, so they don't have that requirement. And then funding application forms is, so I would say that is probably looking at a April 13th date. No, for client database. The funding application forms, probably looking at April 27th. And that basically is digitizing some of the forms that they use right now to be able to take that information, not have to enter it twice. So.
Okay, very good. Sean?
Thank you, Your Worship. The Dino merchandising program and the branding strategy kind of go hand in hand, so if I understand, April 6th will be a date for that. I'm going to propose June 1st to come back with any additional strategy for branding, as well as the Dino merchandising program. Municipal Corporation, I'm continuing doing research. I have some meetings in Edmonton scheduled in April, and at that time, by the end of May, I should be able to bring some research forward to council. And the Dinosaur Capital Attraction, that's ongoing work.
So when's the municipal corporation research coming back?
The end of May, or that could also come back on the June 1st meeting.
Okay. Just curious, with this merchandising program, because we want it to be kind of a fundraiser for us, is there any chance, is that being worked on so that maybe we can have stuff out for this summer? Is that the plan?
I do have some some manufacturers lined up. Until I have the brand, I can't really do anything. That's kind of the issue. So once I have that in hand, I promise I will work as quickly as I possibly can to get something.
Wonderful. Thank you. Okay, perfect. Everything done there then. So we shall move on to 6.2.1. Corporate services.
Thank you, Your Worship. Okay. So first, I want to apologize that this information wasn't included in part of my quarterly report. It's a new ad that I haven't quite registered in my brain. And then I also wanted to apologize because I see when I looked at the agenda, you were given some incomplete information, 2018, 2017, 2016, 15, 14, 13. So what had happened, as you would recall, the mayor had asked us to start tracking this information with the intention is that we are going to go back and build the history, but resources haven't been dedicated to do that yet. Right now, we're just trying to capture the 2019 and 2020 moving forward. So we've kind of worked that each department is responsible for capturing, because often, corporate services isn't aware of grants being issued or applied for, or just more or less when we get favorable results is typically when we get involved. So I personally can only speak to any grants that were applied under corporate services, and of course, most of them, or a number of them, MSI, BMTG, federal gas, those are just automatic awards to us. So you can see there also is a number of grants that are applied for where we're just waiting pending decisions. And we may not get those decisions until sometime later this year. So if anybody had any questions regarding any specific grants, it would be the individual departments that could discuss that.
Comments? Okay, I brought this forward because I met with our MP, Kevin Sorensen, last year. He said it would be great if he had a sheet that said all the federal things that we applied for, what we won, what we lost. Same would go for now working with Nate Horn, our MLA. So I personally would like to see this broken into provincial, federally, and other or something, because I can't really take this to them with the way it looks. Also, I'm just somewhat confused on some, I'd like to say something that says, yes, it's a win, no, it's a loss. Is it open, is it closed? I look at some of these and they go November 30th, but if I go back, they've said the same date for 2012, 2013, 2014. So I'm not sure sometimes which year I'm in. So yeah, if I could get a little more clarification, I know that I can work with the province and the federal a little bit more if I have more clarification on this. So I'd appreciate that. Anybody else? Tom, go ahead.
Yeah, could you clarify how this process works? I get asked all the time, why doesn't the town have a grant person? And I'm not quite sure how to answer that. We don't have a grant writer individual per se, individual departments just apply for grants, or could you kind of explain that process?
Do you want me to speak to that? Sure. To the best of my knowledge, each individual department, I would suggest along with communications, when you have to kind of write a bit of a story, would be preparing their own grant applications and submitting them. So typically, Director of Infrastructure is aware of the grants that are applicable and available to his area of responsibility. Similarly, for us corporate services, we are aware of the HR components in those particular grants that are available. And yeah, everybody does their own, and that's why they're kind of up to them to record on the sheet what they're applying for and the purpose and maintaining and managing the responses to those grants applications.
So I guess what I've been hearing from people is that is a bit of a hit and miss process. And it is at the whim of the ability of the person to write the grants. It takes away some of the value of the project that is being applied for, that the grant is being applied for, and the determination on whether the money gets allocated is, what I'm saying, is based on the ability of that grant writer. And so some people are better at writing grants, some people are are worse. And so I guess my fear is that some of this stuff might be slipping through our fingers, not because it isn't worthy of getting grant money, but simply because the person writing the application is maybe not quite as experienced or not quite as knowledgeable. And so I know we've talked about this on council for years. And I'm just wondering how that could be addressed, or is it being addressed, or is there somebody that, kind of signs up on all of these things and is the expert on the staff, and probably the CAO, but anyways, if you could just comment on that.
So the answer to your question, Tom, is that when the grants leave, before they leave, they all get signed off, reviewed by me. So so I can tell you what I see for a lot of the grants that come through are, it's not free form. So you don't get to necessarily tell a story. It's all about, tell us why this project is important to you in 67 words or less, right? Tell us, and so you don't actually get to provide much in a lot of the ones that are on here. So the ones that are very free flowing and stuff, we absolutely, like we've engaged for a couple of STIP grants. We've engaged someone who's outside the organization to try to help us with them. And we've had the exact same success as internally, right? I'm not saying that that's good or bad. I'm just saying that there isn't, in some of them, there isn't much flexibility as to what you're actually able to put in. But having said that, we also review with usually there's a contact person for whoever the grants are being administered by. So we always talk to them to ask them what they're looking for and how can we help ourselves get to successful grants. And we've had some very good advice in the past, but in some cases it's just simply you're up against, I'll use a good example that we have in here. You'll see that there's STIP grants, which is Strategic Transportation Infrastructure Program. I think that there's about $3 million for airports this year. I think that there's about $55 or $58 million of requests from Alberta airports. So again, some of them ones just come down to what's the most important thing that they look at. So, I think that, I don't know if that answers your question correct or deeply enough, but we certainly do try to provide as much information to create a story about why we're the most important. But sometimes we're successful and sometimes not.
Fred?
I'm just trying to understand the format, and I just went down to the airport and it says amount requested. Where did it go? Sorry. $106,500. Then it says total project cost. I keep losing it. Sorry. 142, and it says 100% of grant contribution. I haven't got a clue what that all means. Go ahead.
If I may.
Yeah, go
I
ahead.
suspect, I'm going to suggest this document is a bit of work in progress.
Okay.
And again, because 5 or 12 hands are inputting, that perhaps a formula or two has been maybe erased.
Okay.
So we will clean that up to try to prevent that from happening, to make sure that we'll lock some fields and whatnot.
And just to answer your question, Fred,
Yeah.
STIP grants are 75% provincially funded, 25% from the municipality. So that's what that number should be. So the numbers are 75, but in 2019.
2018, 75% funded, so then the 2019 is 25% funded by the municipality, which equals 100%, so hence you're saying 100%.
Right.
Anybody else? Jay, go ahead.
Just very quickly, though, I think what Tom's trying to get at, and I want to be crystal clear, is that there is popular folklore that the town of Drumheller misses out on any number of grants because we haven't funded a position specifically, whose job it is. Sorry? I don't know. Either way, if when I look at the list, and I had to do so with a magnifying glass, so I hope that one of the next versions of this is that it comes in a version like that that's a little more user friendly. Is that I think it's absolutely right, Barb and Daryl, that the managers and directors would be very aware of the public sector grants that are available in some of those things. But a grant writer is expected to be on top of a lot of the private sector grants that are still applicable. And so you might see that our success rate for municipal and public sector grants is actually pretty good. Our success rate for private sector grants, maybe not so good. And so I think part of it is the more lines you cast into the water, the more fish you pull out. And so if there really needs to be a retasking of jobs, or council has to look at how how the org chart fits as it relates to someone who's one of their primary tasks is this, then we need to know, right? We need to know if this is something that's got to change in job description area. But if you're saying that no, you feel like that folklore is incorrect, and that we're doing an adequate job of gathering in the funds that are available, then that's we want to make sure the message is clear. Would we be better off to have more direct focus for a staff member whose job it is to become the go-to person for grant writing in the organization, or would we be better off to continue under the current system, it appears, where you're saying every department for themselves?
So I think I guess the short answer to your questions, I don't know if you would be more successful with a dedicated grant writer. I guess I think about your question of private sector grants. So if you look under Family and Community Support Services, there are some in there that are successful or unsuccessful. I don't know about private sector funding infrastructure stuff, and maybe there are groups out there that will fund it.
See, and that's the thing, right?
Yeah.
I mean, one of the things we know for a fact is how few dollars are actually accessed every year by post-secondary students. In terms of the dollars that are available for grants that are available versus the dollars that are actually granted, there's a vast chasm of dollars that go unspent every year. And so no one has the time to actually invest in the software that's required to go about seeking out all the grants that are potentially available. And I have a sneaking suspicion that for P3 partnerships, there's got to be a lot of private sector grants that we're completely unaware of. And the only way to know is if someone's retasked to spend a great deal of their time researching such a thing. And so I think that's what we're getting at, is it not?
So
Well, recall the meeting that we had when I had mentioned that we put a lot of funds aside so that we use those funds for that. Am I the only one that remembers that? Anyways, doesn't matter. Well, I guess it's a thing we should decide as council how we want to go forward with that and give administration some direction.
yeah, and I think just one of the other things, and I know this from even when we've looked at infrastructure grants from partners like Co-op, for instance. Co-op has a great program. However, specifically municipalities are 100% exempt, right? So there are a number of those groups that, and that's why, for instance, the Community Garden has become a nonprofit society group, because now they can apply for grants that the municipality never could apply for before. So it's trying to work the system to be able to get as much money into the community, and sometimes it's not directly as a result of the town of Drumheller applying, but trying to get somebody to apply to do that for us. So, and those aren't necessarily mentioned in here, but yeah, point taken. And I think it's something we can review to see if there's an opportunity to look at whatever else is out there for especially the ability to do grant writing on a contract basis or something like that, perhaps. So.
Okay, anybody else? 6.2.2, please.
Thank you, Your Worship. So before you is a request for decision. We're seeking authorization of the annual, it's an annual request to authorize the write-off of outstanding utility account balances that have been deemed uncollectible and have been sent for collection. So as a refresher, in 2017, the water and wastewater bylaw was adopted. And part of that new bylaw back then was to enable the town to mitigate its losses from bad debt by ensuring that utility accounts are in the name of the property owner so that any debt that's incurred and not paid gets transferred to the property taxes. At that time, we did have a number of tenant accounts that were grandfathered until such time as the service was disconnected in their name. And every year, we're dwindling down those number of accounts and the number and the value of bad debt. So, for example, I think year-end 2016 was over $20,000 of bad debt. So this year, we're seeking council approval to write off roughly $1,200, $1,202.90 to be exact. And hopefully next year it should be, well, obviously not, hopefully it'll be even less next year as we continue to dwindle down.
Can I get a motion, please, Jay?
I move that council approve the write-off of the utility bad debts as listed in attachment A in the amount of $1,202.90 against the allowance for bad debt account.
Seconder, Lisa, comments? Lisa?
Just a quick question, Barb. Did I just hear you say that the bad debt is then applied onto the tax bill? How? Okay, so I just want a clarification on that because I'm like, in my mind, the third party, after this step is done, will move towards collecting those funds, correct?
I'm sorry. No, the bad debt, any bad debt does go onto the, it's not a bad debt if the bill is in the property owner's name, then it never becomes a bad debt. It gets transferred to utilities or to property tax and forms part of the property tax collection. It only is a bad debt when it's in a tenant's name.
Okay.
And then we have to sell it to collections.
Gotcha. So these ones moving forward go onto the tax bill.
No, these ones that we're
They're
writing
still
off.
outstanding from.
Yes,
Oh,
these ones
gotcha.
are tenant names that have walked away without paying their debt. Yeah.
Anybody else, Jay?
Thank you, Your Worship. I just wanted to say, Barb, congratulations. I mean, a real positive move forward. I think any business that had millions of dollars in sales of their product, which the water utility does, had a write-down of $1,200 in bad debt, that would be considered a tremendous success. And again, you've been crystal clear that this is an annual maintenance accounting move. And it has been in no way, shape, or form the ceasing of attempts to collect this money, though that carries on through our collection agency. So it's just well done. I mean, to go from $20K down to $1,200 in a couple of years is very well done.
Anybody else? Okay, all in favor? Okay, I'm going to move Communications Officer Report. Michael, can you make a note to move that to March 16th, please? Dave, 6.4.1, please.
So before you is a request for a decision for a contract for 3 years of gravel supply for the inventory for the Public Works Group. Basically, this is so that we have a supply of gravel in our yard for use on our maintenance projects, our construction projects, and road maintenance. Previously, we've been buying it as needed. With the larger yard, we can actually stockpile it and do better purchasing processes. So the purpose of this is to sign a 3-year contract with Gallagher Trucking, a local firm, for $92,000 each year for 3 years to supply us with the necessary gravel. And we'll weigh it and then stockpile it pay it as necessary out of our inventory funds, and then store it at our yard for stockpile. It's a very straightforward process.
Motion, please, Lisa.
I move that the town of Drumheller award the 3-year crushed gravel supply contract to Reg Gallagher Trucking Limited for the submitted price of $276,000 excluding GST.
Seconder, please. Tony, comments? Jay?
Thank you, Your Worship. The only thing missing, Dave, and I realize, given the kind of contract we're talking about, it's not the typical sort of thing that we would see, but I am accustomed to finding out what were we expecting to have to pay.
Okay. I will, I'll look that up based on the, since I'm not familiar with what the rates were here previously, I can't really comment on that, but I can find that information out for you.
Just a very broad range in quotes, right? And so I'm always curious. I mean, typically when we have an expected range so it's budgeted, I realize that when we're stockpiling an inventory item, it doesn't necessarily go on the budget the same sort of way. But at the same time, if accepting this contract is going to save us $10,000 a year over what we were accustomed to spending, I always like to be able to take note of that. So just in the future.
I'll find out what we've paid for gravel in the last year, in the last couple of years, so that we can compare, and I'll bring that forward to, I'll distribute that information to council.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Anybody else? All in favor? Carried. Greg, you want to give your report, please?
Thank you, Your Worship. Yes, Mayor and Council, my report is not that lengthy. If there are any questions, I'd be happy to
Any
answer.
questions on Greg's? Go ahead, Fred.
More of a compliment, Greg. Your fenced dog park, we've, as a family, we've had the opportunity to use it just about every day, and it's a great addition. I've heard lots of feedback from people, and I would sure like to see us go forward and create more of these areas, maybe throughout the valley, being we're so long. Maybe with Darwin and flood mitigation, maybe there's land that's not going to be applicable for anything, and maybe we can ride on that.
Yeah, I have
right on
spoken
that.
briefly with
Anyway,
Chief
good
Goody.
job. Thank
Yep,
you.
but
Anybody else? Tom?
Yeah, regarding the dog park, my recollection was we were going to get a report back as to how it went for like a year, that we were trying the dog park, where it is and how big it is and how it worked, and you were going to come back with how it worked and if we should expand, if we should have more or less, bigger, smaller. Is that, you're going to do that?
yes,
Okay.
just not today, sir, but yes. Yes.
And also the Hoodoo parking project, are you going to outline what the changes are going to be for this year?
I can certainly do that. We're still in the nascent stages for this year, but we are in the process of hiring and staff, but I'll be happy, as I mentioned, I'll be happy to come back and give an interim report or what the plans are, improvements, et cetera, sure.
Yeah, so do you think, Greg, maybe middle of June, would that be okay? Would you be ready? Okay, so we'll just put, Mike, if you can make a note for June 15th, please, for an update on the hoodoos, and we'll just know what we're going into for the summer. Anybody else on Greg's report? Go ahead, Lisa.
Hi, Greg. Can you elaborate a little bit more on the inmate work program policy? So does this include like training of more staff so we can utilize the labor more so, or what's the end game?
Well, Dave and I are working on that together. We've gotten by previous years and some very good results from the inmate supervisor working with inmates in the community, gardening, things like that. We do, Darwin Durney wishes also perhaps for his purposes to employ inmate workers, and we're going to work on that like going forward together, separate but together for different crews. But Dave and I are working on the policy. It is not yet done. We are looking at hiring, but that's not been completed yet either.
Yeah.
It's my opinion, in a town like this, the more inmates that we could use serves everyone better. It helps them, helps us with labor, improvements in the community. We are looking to expand, correct me if I'm wrong, Dave, some of the purposes, some of the jobs as well that have been accepted in the past, expand that to perhaps working in parks, or we had discussed Midland Park, things like that.
Our intention of updating creating the guidelines is so that when the town of Drumheller is making use of the inmate program and the flood mitigation group are making use of the inmate program, that we're both making use of it in the same way and in a consistent fashion, and that there's a clear set of instructions for the inmate supervisor that we hire under contract, and that we're making the best use of the inmates that we have available so that we can make use of them on good days, bad weather days, and have a variety of tasks for them that are clearly documented and tracked so that we can make sure that we can make good and effective use of them. So that's the goal of it.
Awesome to hear, because I feel personally that the program's not utilized as much as it should be, and considering the STEP program cuts, perhaps this would be a good way to help fill some of those voids. So
We have
good to
gotten
hear.
by, yes, Ms. Acker, we have gotten by in the past with, how do you say, not bare bones, but minimal policy, hiring good people for the most part, and good understanding with Corrections Canada. A lot of times, though, things have happened, not cataclysmic or bad, but the Public Works, the operations boss is left wondering, what do I do there? What do I do here? He'll ultimately call myself or the infrastructure director to work through these. But if we had a set policy, and nothing elaborate, I'm not talking 30, 40 pages, but guidelines, what to do, safety first, things like that. That's what, and it should be done very shortly here. But
Anybody else? I commend you, Greg. The tourism corridor is starting to look really nice. I've had compliments on that, so send a thank you to your team. Derelict vehicles, I've had rave reviews on the amount of old vehicles that have been cleaned up, so thank you. And yes, I'm going on Wednesday for the change of the guard for the new warden, and he's born and raised here, and probably like some of the rest of us will die here. So I'm sure he'll work close with us to get that program.
yeah, we have a really good relationship, I think.
So
Yes.
awesome.
Yeah.
Okay, thanks so much, Greg. So can I get a motion to adopt Greg's as presented? Fred, second. Lisa, all in favor? Carried. Is this something new we have to do, Mike? I just never have done this in the past, so. Oh, you want me to do best practice? Okay, Mike, we'll do best practice. All right, Greg, let's talk about criminal record check fee policy.
Yes, current record check fee policy in front of you could not have been completed without the help of Mike McLean. We did this together, and his work was, could not have produced this without his dedication and his assistance. Important to remember as we work through this, when you see vulnerable, when council reads the term vulnerable sector check, that also includes the basic criminal records check. You can't have one without the other for reference. It isn't a case of I can walk in and get a vulnerable sector check, or I can get a criminal record check. You can't get one without the other. You can't get the vulnerable sector check unless the basic record check has been completed. Is everybody straight? You can get the basic criminal record by itself, but it's, as the analogy I used with Mike was, that you can buy a nice Cadillac interior, but you have to buy the car first. So it's the same with the criminal records check and their vulnerable sector check. We did a survey review of many things, cost being one of the main things we were looking at. On page 2, and I don't know, I'm sure council has read this, I can go over the whole thing again, or would you like me to answer questions and field concerns regarding, sorry? A review of the practice of the town and 16 other municipalities within a similar population range found fees ranging from $0 to $65. The average fee for the checks were around $35. The town, as I said in my preamble, was one of the 4 communities charging volunteers for a vulnerable sector check, which also includes a criminal records check to do that.
Greg, I'm actually going to ask you to hold off here because
Okay.
that clock is wrong up there, and it's actually 5:25. We got to go into a public hearing here shortly, so I'm just going to get you to hold those thoughts. Council, if you want to take a 5-minute break before we start the public hearing, that'd be good. Thank you. Okay, welcome back. We'll call this public hearing bylaw 02.20 to order. The purpose of this public hearing is to consider bylaw 02.20, which amends land use bylaw 10.08 by inserting new wording and definitions into the bylaw to bring it into accordance with the recent revisions to federal legislation regarding the sale and production of cannabis products and cannabis production facilities. The town at this point has not received any written submissions. There's no public here to speak. Any questions from council? I will close this hearing. We'll now reconvene our regular council meeting. So back to you, Greg. Criminal record check.
Thank you, Ms. Colbert. Thank you, Worship. Would appreciate some input after I get through my report from council regarding an option here. There's a degree of strategic decision-making that hinges on the principles of cost recovery and regulation. We're seeking direction to determine if the fees charged for criminal record checks and the eligibility for waiving fees in an acceptable policy, approved policy. Somebody may seek to get a criminal record check for a variety of reasons: employment, volunteering, immigration application, a pardon application. There are a variety of things. The basic, in the strict federal RCMP government central repository language, a name-based criminal record check is the basic criminal record check that will indicate what somebody has existing record, adverse information or not. A vulnerable sector check is again a name-based record check plus a check to see if a person has a record suspension, pardon for particular offenses. Someone who has a record for such offenses, it may or may not be preferable to have that person operating in certain workplace or volunteer environments. And the people that administer such programs or do the hiring wish to know this about people they hire. If, for example, I was to run the name Mr. J. Garbutt in the record check index, and it came back with enough similarities, I'm not trying to be funny, but but please take it for the intent I mean it. But it came back with sufficient similarities to another person in the country, could be from Deer Lake, Newfoundland, Whitehorse, Yukon, Frobisher Bay, could be from any of these places, but that if enough similarities existed, that would necessitate, even though Mr. Garbutt's record, for example, as submitted, when with the indicators, date of birth, complete name, there may be enough similarities to warrant the checking against someone else who may already have an existing record. Now, the only way to do that is through the submission of fingerprints to the Central Repository in Ottawa. And for that, the RCMP charges $50, and that is out of our hands. That is out of the hands of any community that contracts RCMP policing. That $50 is the fee that is required to take the prints, submit them for checking, whether it's a human checking it or whether it's checked through basically a computer. That is the fee, and there is no way around that. But that is only if sufficient indicators exist as the system would wish to clarify that the person applying and thus may have a clean record, that this is indeed that person. Anybody have any questions on that? Okay. Mike has put a chart up here, just by way of numbers. Last year, the RCMP detachment did 781 record checks completely. Of that, 76% were residents of the town of Drumheller. 422 and 171, approximately 593 checks were done regarding citizens of Drumheller. Under the current fees charged, they generated approximately $22,000 total in revenue. Some communities, such as Red Deer, Grand Prairie, others, there is another chart Mike and I put together here, charge nothing for employment, and they also charge nothing for a check that is needed for a volunteer service. Some also charge nominal fees. Some charge a $5 fee, some charge a $10 fee. If someone resides in a rural area, not under municipal contract, it is generally that their criminal record check fees are non-existent. There's no charge. It has evolved with municipal contracts, and it's very difficult sometimes to get the exact reasons why, but it appears to be somewhat the area of cost recovery. Staff are doing certain tasks, taking away from regular, and the extra work to obtain the check is looked as basically one of the reasons, main reason being cost recovery. Now, to provide context, a review of 16 towns with populations between 7 and 15,000 was conducted. 15 municipalities charged for the basic criminal record check. 4 charged an extra fee for but their vulnerable sector check. But all of these, all of these are the same fee. If you charge, there's no charge for a vulnerable sector check once the basic one is completed. For applicants seeking a name-based check and vulnerable sector check for employment purposes, there's a list of communities that do not charge. Blackfall, Strathmore, Morinville, Olds, Canmore, Brooks, Whitecourt, Hinton, Coaldale. These were on our random sampling of communities we selected. For applicants seeking a name-based record check and vulnerable sector for volunteering, fees are not charged. Again, there's a list of other communities that do not charge. Blackfall, Strathmore, Morinville, Olds, Canmore, Ponoka, Sylvan Lake, Edson, Brooks, Whitecourt, Hinton, and Coaldale. Presently, the town of Drumheller charges $37, which kind of puts us median in the middle for all checks. But this is a charge we also levy for volunteer checks required for volunteer purposes. Mike, could you put that chart, or maybe that chart back up? The square chart, please. Now, these are numbers not set in, these are just numbers that were chosen to give some idea of revenue collected if a certain cost was associated to the check. So if, for example, given, and Mike, if there's something I'm omitting here, please add in. If we had not charged for checks conducted for volunteers last year, it would have been approximately $800 in fees we would not have collected if the volunteer cost had been waived, if the check was being obtained for volunteer purposes. Any questions on that? Is that 8,800? Sorry. Okay. And we would have only, instead of the approximately 22,000, we would have collected approximately $13,164 approximately. Again, the numbers put together here. Option 4 is approximately as things were conducted last year. Some communities charge a lot more that are not on Michael's and my chart. Some charge significantly higher, double, in fact, the Drumheller charges. Under municipal contract as well to the RCMP. Any questions on this chart? This was just numbers we chose to give an idea what approximate revenue. Sorry? I'm sorry? Okay. Do you have the comparison? Oh. Libby, can you put the comparison chart up with all the communities on it? Just the last one, Mike? Do you have this? Oh, okay. Sorry? What do you want to do? No, I was just going to read one more, the options of cost recovery. Sorry. One of the last primary strategic decisions to be addressed by council is the level of cost recovery and subsequent operating subsidy that is funded through Property taxation. On one hand, council moves to adopt a fee structure that lowers the cost recovery to provide the service at a lower rate or free for volunteer and employment purposes. On the other hand, council may prefer to follow a user pay model in which a larger portion of the admin costs are recovered through higher fees. I'll be happy to answer any questions.
Go ahead, Tony.
Thanks, Greg. Mike, very detailed work on it. I know this is something that we had to implement a year ago in order to get budgets balanced and things like that. It's always been important to me that we relook at this again. Volunteers are a big part of our community. Just want some clarity on the total applications that you have laid out there for 2019, the 781. So the 593 that were in town are the ones that paid and generated the $22,000 at $37 a piece.
Those are the total checks. Yep.
The ones that were from out of town, the 188 you indicated didn't pay,
Right. Rural residents don't have to pay.
which amounts to $7,000. So did somebody pay? Did the counties pay? Or,
No, the rural residents don't pay for criminal record checks.
okay, it's probably something we need to look at in the ICF.
Yeah, so if I could interject it. So I think to answer your question directly, Tony, so we paid, right? So, right, our MEs who do those reports subsidize for the ones that don't pay. So the 188 that are done outside of Drumheller would have been done by Drumheller municipal employee staff. The item is on discussions with all four of our intermunicipal collaboration framework neighbors for this month. So it's absolutely something we want to talk to them about.
Good to know. Okay, and then just moving to the other chart with the one that you had, that one there that you have up there right now. I like the option 5, a couple of reasons. Moving a volunteer fee back to 0 is what I look at as not really an out-of-pocket expense. We pay for that individual anyways as part of our budget to run this correctly. So in my mind, it's kind of like spring cleanup. We have staff, we pay them anyways. So is it truly a out-of-pocket expense? I like the $37 where the employment sector, which is normally reimbursed for that cost anyways, could carry some of the load. So it brings some latitude back into the picture here. So yeah, I support this, and I really like the option 5 idea. The only changes that I would kind of want you to consider is in number 2 of your council policy. I'm okay with A, and I think A should drive the process. A volunteer letter from the organization requesting the check be done on behalf of Joe Blow. I don't know that adding B in there would make this a make-work project. I think either we do it or we don't. To analyze financial need over $37, I don't know that brings value or not. And also in the wording there of the resident that volunteers for a local group in Drumheller may be from out of town. That should not, it should be driven by the letter requesting it, not where you live. I'm sure there's lots that live outside of Drumheller that help us with the groups here as well. And the other point I'd make is on C, restricting it to 5, just questioning whether that might be sufficient for some of the larger groups like minor hockey or citizens on patrol that have a lot more than 5. So maybe that should be in the 10 to 12 range. But other than that, I support the policy.
Tom?
Yeah, lots of good information there. And we seem to be spending a lot of time and energy on this, and it's not really an awful lot of money, is it? One way or the other, whether we collect or whether we don't collect. I appreciate the comparison. We always like to look at how we compare with other municipalities, and of course, we are normally ahead of the curve because we are just so good. So a general comment, first of all, volunteers are absolutely integral to this community. We all know that. I attended the early childhood seminars this last week, and we basically looked at all the resources in the community that we have to support families, to support young children, to support kids. And, you know, one of the commonalities of all of these tremendously valuable organizations was that they're virtually all volunteer run. And the value that they add to this community is absolutely immeasurable. And anything we can do to support volunteers is excellent and is becoming more and more necessary. I mean, one of the aspects of this seminar was to basically look at all the cutbacks in funding for these social programs that volunteers are basically going to have to pick up the slack. So I think we have to help volunteers any way, shape, or form we can, do whatever we can. That being said, on the other side of the coin, that we do have cost recovery that we should be looking at. And I guess I'd draw a bit of an analogy between something like this and, say, building permits. We charge money for building permits because we have staff who are paid to do all the applications and do all the work and all that is necessary. And that's why we charge. And I can see a parallel here. We have staff who are going to be doing all this work, and they are getting paid, and maybe there should be some cost recovery there. In terms of the financial need aspect, I think what you're getting at there is, and correct me if I'm wrong, we're not looking at the financial need of the individual, but the financial need of the organization that this person is volunteering for. And I actually like that, and that to me is a parallel with our community assistance grant. That's why we brought the necessity of having any organization that is applying for a community assistance grant give us a financial statement. And so I can see, you know, somebody volunteering for an organization in the community. If the organization's got lots and lots and lots of money in the bank, and we have organizations like that in town that do, then maybe that should be a qualifying factor, that we should be looking at that. I mean, to have 5 of their volunteers get a criminal record check for free when they could be charged, you know, $25 or $10 or whatever, and they've got, you know, $25, $50, $100,000 in the bank, you know, that to me, that should be a consideration. But and I think the rural fee, where the rural lack of fee came in, was, and Fred and I have worked on this very hard over the last number of years, is changing the Police Act so that smaller rural communities actually pay for their policing. And I think this is where that comes from, is that people in Drumheller pay for their policing, people in Morin and Delia, and they don't. And I don't know if that's come into effect this year, or it will, but I don't know if it is in effect now. So I think that's where that came from, is that rural people, well, you don't pay for policing, you don't pay for a criminal record check. So I think that's where that came from. So anyways, I liked Councillor Locker's idea that I like number 1 or number 5. I think we should absolutely, you know, irregardless of the organization, give the volunteers a break. But I do like recovering some of the costs, so I would go along with that, number 1 or number 5.
Lisa?
Well, I'm going to swim against the stream a little bit. So in regards to 2C, where a volunteer organization has not requested more than 5 name-based criminal record checks and vulnerable sector checks in a calendar year, coming from being a parent who has her kids in basketball, in order to drive your kids to tournaments, every parent is required to have this check done. So you can only imagine how many parents have to have that done for the high school alone. So I feel that that's very restrictive. And then going down onto the 3 there, volunteer organizations that have requested more will have to pay. So in that vein, I personally would choose option 2. I think a $5 charge for a volunteer, the cost of 2 coffees for 1 year, is more than acceptable, with the $40 there for the vulnerable sector check and the employment check. As some of you may or may not know, you can go online and just get the employment check from Backcheck for $50. So by putting it at 40 for 2 checks, you're still getting a cut on that rate, and then the $5 would eliminate the need to have to track per organization as to how many people are actually going every year to get their check done. So personally, that's the route I would recommend. I think that's the fairest.
Brad?
Well, I'm going to quote somebody that came in to see me not that long ago, Graham Griffin, and you would know him as Volunteer of the Year a couple of years ago. And one of the things he asked is please look at this. He volunteered over 4 organizations, and every time he volunteered, whether it was all in one day, he had to get a separate criminal check for each one. So it cost him $148 to volunteer for 4 organizations in our community. And multiply that over the different people that you can think of that volunteer over a number of organizations. We have to have some way of trying to keep that at a reasonable rate. I would tend to agree with Lisa that we have to make it affordable recovery, affordable for the volunteers. It needs some skin in the game, but make it affordable for people who volunteer over multiple groups. Or we figure out a way that a person goes and get a record check, and they only have to do it once. They don't have to continually, they could reuse it for a different organization or something.
Christine?
That is exactly what I was going to say, Fred. 1 check per year kind of a thing. And I'm as well like option 2, just because of that little bit of cost recovery there. And also like what Tom said about some organizations like the Humane Society, for example, if they could have that volunteer fee waived just because they are operating on such a shoestring budget. But yeah, I'm liking number 2 as well.
Anybody else? Go ahead, Jay.
I'm a bigger fan of option 2. I think everyone said it. It's ridiculous to me that someone who volunteered for any organization in town who lives outside of Drumheller proper would pay nothing. So I'm glad we're revisiting that. It's got to be made fair. Generally speaking, if anybody's going to try to cut revenue that we've already budgeted, I think it's reasonable to ask them to find the money someplace. So if we're going to make things really free, if that's ultimately where we're headed, then the subsequent cut in revenue, even if it's just $9,000, we should be talking about where we think that ought to come from. But I would agree that I think it was council's vision. I don't think we ever anticipated that volunteers would be paying these fees to get criminal record checks. I believe we all anticipated that it would be the organizations for whom they volunteer who are demanding said check who would be paying for it. It was never our intention to punish individual volunteers with out-of-pocket expenses. And so I'd rather see that that if we go with a very low cost recovery program of any kind for non-employment criminal record checks, that we do have a system in place that requires them to make sense of this. So in other words, we say that April and May shall be free criminal record check months, and if you send somebody to volunteer who's been your volunteer all year, but you send them in September, it's $37. Because you should have taken it when they got it for the other organizations that they volunteer for. in April and May, or whatever we decide is amnesty month or whatever, to try to stop this from happening where people are gathering multiple criminal record checks over the course of a year. I realize it's a blunt tool that's in all like that in reality someone could argue is useless the day after it was issued, because you could have committed a crime the next day and it wouldn't have shown on that previous criminal record check. But if this is the standard, then it only makes sense that someone should have to be able to get one into a 12-month period, and that be accepted across the municipality for whatever organization you're volunteering with. And if their larger parent organizations have different bylaws, then they have different expectations and should be willing to pay the fees that go with having someone having to subject our system to multiple checks in a year. I don't think there's anything wrong with asking organizations to be responsible in how they task our staff and use their time. It's not appropriate for someone to have to submit to this process 4 times and go out of pocket. That was never our intention. So I'm personally in favor of option 2 because it has the least impact on revenue. I do think people value what they pay for. I would hope it was in fact the member organizations who were footing the $5 bill, but I'd love to see a penalty if we're getting multiple checks for people on a voluntary basis, because the other organizations should be willing to accept the one someone got last month for whatever organization they already received it.
Everybody else done? Okay, I've got letters here from the Rotary Club, from DVSS, from a couple parents. I won't read them all, but are against the criminal record check. And I personally agree with them, because you know what, this community wouldn't survive without volunteers. Half of the stuff that we do wouldn't get done without volunteers. You look at this list of communities, 16 communities, and we're only one of 4 that actually charge for volunteers. I mean, if we're trying to advance this community and we're gonna start making volunteers pay, I completely disagree. I don't think there should be a cap. I think the president of the organization or the leader of the organization should sign them off to be sure that they are. I mean, we got schools, got events on all the time, and I just don't think you're always already asking the parents to do a lot. We're asking parents to coach, we're asking parents to drive, we're asking volunteers to Rotary, for example, gives all their money back to the community. Why should we be asking them to now take that money that could go back to our community and put it into criminal record checks? I completely disagree. I think $37 for employment, I'm fully in favor of option 5. Like I said, I just don't think we'd even have the support, or we wouldn't be able to accomplish everything we do in this community without volunteers. How many volunteers did we have on Family Day? Darren, what, you had to have 20, 30, 40 people step up? That day would not go off without volunteers. So I think that, we got to really consider this, saying, that organizations have money and they should pay for them. Maybe so, but at the same time, that money usually goes back into something for our community. So I'm absolutely against any of them other than number 5, personally. So, got all the information you need, Greg? Okay.
Yes, thank you. I guess, sorry, I just have one question, just that the Councillor Makawecki brought up. And so I think fundamental to this is that, so use a personal, I volunteer for 3 organizations. I've never needed to use anything more than my 1 record check that I've received. So I think part of it has got to be the organizations asking, why are they asking for this information? Because that in and of itself, like there are organizations that you should get a criminal record check if you have fiduciary responsibility, if you are around the vulnerable, right? Absolutely, those are given. But if you're handing out hot dogs on a barbecue on, long weekend in May, why are they asking those members to get criminal record checks? And I think that's part of it is that in the past, they just did it because it was free. And I am not offering a comment one way or the other on it, but I think part of it's got to go back to these organizations to say, why are you actually asking for this? And if there's, again, if you're doing 1 a year, or maybe it's 2 a year, I think part of it has to be what's reasonable. So, and I don't know the answer.
Back to the comment, I mean, if somebody gets a criminal record check, today, and even if they do something tomorrow, with the way our court system is, they might get through 4 years from now. So, so I don't think that that's really something. So yeah, I think maybe that's something that, I don't know, Greg, is it the RCMP that required the criminal record check for every organization, or is it organization? So yeah, so maybe the organization's got to review this. Okay, so does anybody else want to add anything? Go ahead, Jay.
I will add, Your Worship, that just to be clear, because of the way that some of the comments were phrased, this is council policy. So it will be whatever we decide it will be. Administration's job is merely to collect data and make recommendations. So if there's additional things for which you feel strongly, then I suggest that you communicate them back to administration prior to this coming forward for its passing at what I assume will be the nearest council meeting to doing it. And I'm also going to go on record saying we spent more time talking about this than we did a $55 million budget.
Anybody else? All right, let's move on to 6.6.1, Darren.
Thank you, Your Worship. My apologies for not being available last week to have this presentation and conversation with you guys. October, November, and December certainly feel like ages and ages ago, so I'll keep it brief. You have it in front of you there. Christmas party season was great at the BCF. We had back-to-back parties, and when I say back-to-back, I mean Thursday, Friday, Saturday, Sunday events that were going on, so staff were working through the night. The facility hosted, based on people that are currently there, we hosted our first New Year's Eve wedding, so that was a first of its kind in the BCF for us. Community Guide has been distributed with lots of great programs available in there. Trail of Trees was another successful event in December, as you know, in the lobby of the BCF, with raising funds approximately $800 for the local Jumpstart, which was matched by Canadian Tire locally here, and those funds stay in our community. We also held a very successful campaign in December to promote membership called 443, in which over 90 passes were sold in total. And the 2020 peak wedding season looks very strong for us coming up here, so June, July, August, September. Through the Aquaplex, EduTour groups have been back in renting the facility in the later evening hours for October, November, and they start back up and will be in the facility February through to June. Our school groups were making use of swimming lessons October through November, and once again, they too will be back January through till June. And we've been working with the Canadian Badlands Aquatic Club to develop a bit of a prep program of which new swimmers and those interested in aquatics can register in the program and work on some of their skills before they actually get involved with the club. So then that'll help the club out as well with some of their new swimmers, and they're fully supportive of that program as well. So that's something new coming. Also attached in there is some graphing in that we've put together for facility memberships. So multi-facility is the first page there. You can see it fluctuates from year to year, and it also fluctuates from the type of pass, the type of membership it is. That's on page 44 of 97. And then the 45 of 97 is the Aquaplex only memberships. And page 46 of 97 is the BCF only memberships. Following up at the end of the report there is a list of the quarterly programs, the registered programs that we do, as well as some of the drop-in programs through the BCF there. Some were canceled, some were completed obviously and running, and some of them keep on going and going and going. So they're the drop-in programs. Any questions?
Any questions? Christine?
I just have a quick question, and it's just regarding just something I've observed. I'm seeing a lot of new staff. Do we have a huge staff turnaround, or just a lot of part-time, or there's every day somebody new, it seems like?
We have had some staff turnover. Some have gone on to pursue other options and opportunities that they've had as far as careers go. And we did bring on some casuals that we were trying to get them in time for Christmas rush, but they didn't all pan out in that fashion. So we decided that we still needed them, and they are casual staff. Yeah.
Well, your staff are always the greatest in the town. I'm a little biased, I guess, but most friendly. Thanks and good job.
Thank you for that. I'll pass it on to them.
Anybody else? Jay?
Darren, I'm really glad that you included the multi-facilities and then the BCF separate, because looking at the multi-facilities, it would appear as though every category excluding seniors is significantly down. But when you separate them out, it would appear as though what's really changing is that people who in past years were multi-facility buyers have now picked their favorite. If they're not using the Aquaplex, they're going for a BCF pass instead of the multi-facility, even though that discount was still very significant. I mean, all by itself, the multi-facility graphs are concerning, but in the context of the other two graphs, not as much, not even close. I think what we're very concerned about still is seeing the overall impact of our reductions at the BCF, as well as the fee impact since we changed course, with the original recommendation being to hold the line, and that we still went with the 2% increase. So would you agree with how I've characterized those things, and is there anything that you'd be recommending that we look at doing differently coming up down the pike?
You've identified exactly what I've tried to communicate in some of my previous quarterly reports with the numbers. So this was a different attempt at trying to demonstrate that as people try the facility and use the facility and their families use the facility, they find out different memberships works better for their lifestyles. They buy a family membership and then find out only the mom and one of the children are actually using the facility. So as they're using it, they change the type of pass that they wish to use, or the type of facility pass that they wish to use. So you've exactly that.
Right.
It fluctuates and bounces around constantly.
Not everyone's going to be my family whose children have aged out, and we're still paying for a family membership for two facilities we do not attend.
That's right. Yeah. And then just as far as the rates and that, I think we do have to be cautious. We talked about the pricing elasticity and that. Certainly, our economic times is challenging for all of us in so many ways. So disposable income such as recreation dollars seems to be one of the first things that unfortunately gets hit with being pulled off of the table, and families then start choosing one activity that they participate in or one activity that their children participate in, and we as parents sometimes then take a back seat to keeping ourselves healthy and active.
Thank you.
Tom?
Yeah, I'm just looking on the statistics. I can't seem to find it. The drop-in seniors walking. Now, I've noticed this year that it has been very, very, very popular. To the extent where I refer to the track at times as like Deerfoot at rush hour. It's really quite popular. And I'm just wondering is it on there or?
So we do rough head counts every hour, but it becomes difficult because at 11:05 there may be 0 up there, but at 11:10 when nobody's actually doing the head count, there may be 25 people. So we do rough head counts throughout the facility all the time. There is a seniors toonie walk on page 46 of 97, but once again, those are only with regards to membership. So if they're doing drop-in, as far as point of sale drop-ins and that's not captured within this actual graphing here. You are correct. Certainly that has become a very, very popular program. To the extent I've got asked a few times lately why I'm not doing it on Tuesdays and Thursdays. People can come walk in that facility from the time that we open to the time we close. It's just this is a designated special promotional time that encourages socializing as well. And socializing, as we know, is a very big part of our walking group and part of our community and recreation.
The other one that I'm not sure I see on here is, so Erica does the kind of training, recreation,
Erica does marketing
exercise,
and sales.
and how does that work? How is her program kind of? No, not Amber. From the hospital.
Oh,
How does
Erica
that-
Laycock.
Yeah. How does
So-
that work again? And do you track that at
So
all?
that
'Cause
is,
that's very
uh,
popular.
It is very popular, and this last session has really grown. It's called unsupervised exercise program, of which she works very closely with those clients, and it's actually through Alberta Health Services, and then we bill Alberta Health Services for those clients and that, so.
Anybody else? Okay, anybody? Good? Well done, Darren. And yes, thank you to Chad and Terry Murray. They're great supporters of the community from Canadian Tire. So support your local community. All right.
Good, Your Worship. Just one more quick thing on this, if I may. One of the rare things I get asked about in the facility that is of concern, Darren, is control points. There's, again, folklore in the community that there's a number of people who participate in the walks, who walk the track, who use a piece of equipment from time to time, but enter from the field house door without it going through a control point and showing a membership card. Can you address that?
We are aware that that's a concern, and we've certainly, through our staffing models and staff walkarounds, have tried to ensure that that door remains locked. When there is a user group in as a booking, i.e. Particularly on a Tuesday night when minor soccer is in, we allow them to go through that door because they're a group booking. If it's not a group booking, we typically try not to allow them to go through. Parent Link is another one for the play and roll program. We allow them to go through those doors. Sunday, the drop-in free play program goes through those doors, but otherwise we try to keep the doors locked all the time. Are we 100% successful? No.
So it's fair to say that if you walk through on any given day, if there wasn't a private booking somewhere in the field house, that field house door should not be propped open.
Correct.
Thank you.
Christine?
I just had one more thing to say that in the recent few months that the theft has gone up, I just want to say that I have noticed a lot more locks on lockers now and signs saying lock your stuff up. So I know that there has been folklore that there aren't any signs saying that there is theft, but you guys are doing a really good job bringing that to people's attention, and I see more locks, so that's good.
Absolutely. Lockers are available for rent on a yearly basis, but they are also there for day use. And so people are encouraged. They can bring their own locks. They can put them on for the day. We want them taking them off at the end of the night and taking them home. That's a bit of an educational process that we're going through right now, because we will be cutting locks off at the end of the night, just for safety concerns and that. The other thing is we have not had reported thefts since our little spurt that we had way back in December. So, as you said, recently nothing's been brought to our attention, and thank you for knocking on wood.
And yes, I just recently bought the full year. It's $50. That's it. So you have the lock, keep your stuff in there, and I never forget my headphones, so it's good.
Okay, can I get a motion to accept the quarterly report from Daryl, Christine, Tony? All in favor? Carried. Pardon me?
You called him Daryl.
Oh, sorry, Darren. My apologies. Okay, Sean, you're up.
Great, thank you, Your Worship. Have to excuse me, I'm a little under the weather today. So I'll begin the report. Some of it's a bit moot because these are things that have happened in the past and they've already been made public. So the Raptor Ridge development is underway. There will be a hearing a little later on third reading for passing of the rezoning. Our cannabis production facility, their development permit has been approved, and they're looking at putting together their building permit as we speak. Bylaw updates. We've talked about and already passed the new commercial development incentive, which takes into account return on investment, which is a bit leading edge in this country. I've had a number of requests if they could borrow that from us, which I'm very happy about, and I'm sure there's some that won't even ask, but I'm still happy about that. So moving on, I'm looking at updating the business license bylaw in conjunction with some other departments we work with, as well as the vendor bylaw and special events and filming policy and tidying that up. So that one of the things I'm trying to do is modernize most of the bylaws and policies that I work with, just to bring them up to a 2020 standard. So that's an ongoing venture. Film and TV attraction. As we know, last summer we had a phenomenal year, and we forged some fantastic relationships with some of the biggest studios in North America, and I'm sure the mayor could talk about this, the compliments that this town received from every single production that came here about how we did things right and how helpful we were. So we've got a great name in the industry right now for that. Generally what I try to do is, because obviously film and TV attraction isn't one of my specialties, but economic development is. So I do have the ability to meet with film executives and talk intelligently about attracting films to the Valley on a promotional basis. So we've hired a company called Intercommunicate, which is probably one of the best companies in North America, a producer that came to Drumheller that did a major production here, put me in touch with this person, and I think he called in a favor, and we managed to get this person for under $5,000. This individual worked on films such as Man of Steel, Lord of the Rings, San Andreas Fault, Heartland, Winona Earp. I can go on, and this will be probably one of the best marketing collaterals that we've ever produced here at the town. So I'm very excited to see what happens with that. So that's a bit what we're doing on that front. We're still working on our foreign direct investment marketing collateral. We're going to be receiving the final draft of that here very shortly. That will talk to things about advanced manufacturing, renewable energy, film and TV, agri-value processing. The mayor and I did have some meetings with 3 ambassadors last week from Korea, the United Arab Emirates, and the Netherlands, and we've got some great feedback that they're also willing to look at some projects that we have here in Drumheller. We know that a lot of the investment that's happening in Alberta right now isn't coming from Alberta, just because of our economy here. So we have to use in-house expertise, which we have in foreign direct investment, to go out into the world and use that network to bring investment here, find partnerships, etc. So very excited about the future of that. Our lead funnel, we're up to, and that should read December 2019, not April 2019. So we do have $76 million in our lead pipeline as of December 2019. I'm very happy to say that we do use KPIs, and I'm a big believer in that if we can't measure it, we can't manage it. So I'll give you a good example of this. We had someone make a comment on one of the local how should I put it politely, one of the social media sites, saying that all the town cares about is tourism. Well, I did contact this individual, and I said, well, that's actually incorrect information, because actually only 5% of that total $76 million is tourism related. So I can measure it and I can prove it. So this is one of the reasons why it's great to keep KPIs, because we actually get to disseminate very accurate information. So that would be it on my front.
Questions? Well done, Sean. Thank you. I can commend him with our meetings. I sent you all a list, and was very, very productive. So travel with you anytime. Can I get a motion, please? Christine? Lisa? All in favor? Thank you for your quarterly report. Okay, we'll move down to 8.1. Who's got that one?
I do. So This is a second reading for changing some of the land use bylaw stuff. So they obviously just had a public hearing on it a little while ago. So just in short, what this means is actually amending some of the terms and phrases in our current land use bylaw to take into account changes at the federal level with regards to topicals and consumables. So adding, whereas before cannabis was typically talked about only from an inhalation standpoint, this is now about baking, eating, applying as creams, etc. So we're looking for second reading of these for these changes.
Lisa, please.
I move that council give second reading to bylaw 02.20, land use bylaw amendment, cannabis terminology and definitions.
Seconder. Tom, comments? All in favor? Carried. Do you want me to go to third reading? You got to wait. Okay, so I can get a motion for third reading? Or first I got to get, anybody object to third reading?
I'll move waive objections to third reading, Your Worship.
Okay, it's motion to third reading, or seconder, sorry, all in favor, carried. Motion for third reading, Tom. Seconder, Fred, all in favor, carried. Thank you.
Okay, next on is bylaw 01.20. This is third reading of a bylaw land use amendment to rezone the land commonly known as the RV Sands land from agriculture to residential cottage housing district.
And motion, please. Tom?
Yeah, I move third reading of bylaw 02.20.
I think it's 01. Oh,
It's supposed to be 07.20. There was a typo in that.
07.2, what is it?
07.20.
That's the number.
seconder? Oh, just a minute, we got some. Yeah, so it should be, this council gives third reading to bylaw 07.20, land use bylaw amendment to rezone RV Sands.
Sorry, I'm reading ahead. I apologize. It's 01.20.
Right,
Sorry.
there you go. That's the one.
I move third reading of bylaw 01.20.
Seconder, Christine, comments? All in favor? Carried. Okay, can I move on to 8.3?
Okay, so now this is the 07.20. So this is the fourth IDP, intermunicipal development plan document in front of us, or draft document. So again, this has been worked on between Starland County and the town for a number of months, and appreciate the work that's gone involved with the consultant that Palliser's had hired to actually take this over the finish line. So they've had a hand with all of Drumheller's IDPs, which is great. And this pretty much mirrors the other three that have already gone for reading. So just looking for a motion for first reading of this.
I got a motion, Lisa?
I'll move that council give first reading to bylaw 7.20, which is the Town of Drumheller, Starland County Intermunicipal Development Plan.
Seconder? Oh. Oh, yeah, you got set up.
And set a public hearing for March 16th, 2020, regular council meeting.
Seconder. Jay? All in favor? Carried. Okay, can I get a motion to go closed? Fred?
I move council close the meeting to the public to discuss the manager of economic development's quarterly report containing commercial and financial information as per section 16 1 FOIP.
Can I get a seconder? Christine, all in favor? Carried.